Well, Labour will launch their Child Health Action Plan, tackling what they call a crisis in children's dentistry, and will create 100,000 extra appointments for children.
Let's take a look at some of the key moments of what the leaders got up to in the campaign trail yesterday.
I'm prepared to take bold action to cut people's taxes, protect their pensions and bring migration down. And in contrast, Labour are just going to put everyone's taxes up. That's a choice. Only one of two people will be Prime Minister on July the 5th, Keir Starmer or I. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate just makes it more likely that Keir Starmer is Prime Minister. I'm energised about the vision that we're putting forward for the country.
Childcare and nursery places are really essential. They're so good for children in their development and making sure that when they arrive at primary school they've got the skills that they need. Really good for parents and carers because they can get back into the labour market.
When I took over the leadership of the Liberal Democrats in 2019, we'd had three really tough elections and we lost our way a little bit. And my first speech, you may remember, I said we need to wake up and smell the coffee. And what I said I wanted to do was really listen to people, listen to their concerns and make sure that when we got to this election, our policies responded to them.
Now, the right thing to do is to make work pay. So let's lift the starting point at which anybody pays any income tax to £20,000 a year. That's still well below the average national salary, but well above the current level, which is about £12,570 a year.
Let's now bring in the Shadow Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. We say good morning to Wes Streeting, who joins us now. Wes, looking at Rishi Sunak today and what he's going to say as regards the Conservative manifesto, do you actually think he should be in charge of the Tories today after the debacle at the weekend?
Problem that we're going to have to solve as a country by choosing change at the general election on July the 4th. I actually thought Rishi Sunak's judgment, the values that he demonstrated around D-Day, the choices he made demonstrated why he just doesn't get it and why one of many reasons why he shouldn't be Prime Minister. I thought his mealy-mouthed apology afterwards, I think, just demonstrated that he didn't really understand why people were so upset and angry. But that's not, in many respects, the worst thing this government has done. When you look at the state of our economy, the state of our public services, the extent to which people are really struggling in Britain at the moment, I just don't think with the best will in the world, Rishi Sunak really understands those pressures, and he certainly doesn't have answers. I mean, from what I've read in the newspapers...
It says a lot, Wes, about you politicians and the circumstances you operate under, because there'd be some 24-year-old advising to say, well, here's what you're going to do on Friday, Prime Minister. You're going to stay here for the British commemoration, and then we've got an ITV interview for you, which is more important if you get back home and do that. And he listens to that. It says a lot about maybe Sunak's lack of experience or his desperation, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of desperation hanging in the air, but ultimately, you know, it's very easy to blame the advisors in these situations, but advisors advise, ministers decide, and Rishi Sunak has to be the one that owns that decision. And I never thought I would say this. I had a very low opinion of Boris Johnson by the end of his premiership, but I actually think Rishi Sunak displayed worse character traits than Boris Johnson. I don't think that he would have left our veterans and left world leaders early. I think he would have understood the importance of that day and the importance of being there as the country's Prime Minister. I just don't think Rishi Sunak is the right character for number 10. I don't think he understands why his actions have caused such offence. And I also don't think he understands the challenges and the pressures that families are going through at the moment. And if he did, he certainly wouldn't be now splurging a whole load more unfunded spending commitments today, which ultimately, if he's given the chance and the arsonists are giving the matches back, that's going to send the economy tanking, and it's going to send people's bills, rents and mortgages rising.
We will speak to the Conservatives a little bit later on in the programme about all of that, but let's speak to you about your plans. You're talking about the challenges facing children and families. You want to ban fizzy drinks, or these sort of energy drinks for under 16s, and junk food adverts on TV before 9 o'clock, and you're also hoping to magic up 100,000 extra dental positions or appointments for youngsters. How are you going to do that?
So just on the energy drinks first, so this is a ban on energy drinks to under 16. So these are the drinks that have got over 150 milligrams of caffeine per litre. It's things like your Monsters, your Prime energy drinks. These single cans, half a litre, contain more caffeine than 5 cans of Coca-Cola, to give you a sense of just how highly caffeinated these things are. And we're responding to concerns from parents and teachers about the extent to which kids, particularly teenagers, but I've heard examples of kids as young as 9, being wired on these sorts of drinks. They're not sleeping properly. It's affecting their concentration. It's affecting their well-being as well as their physical health. So we're going to take action on that. Oh, sorry, I missed that point.
I just wanted to know why you think it's the government's role to decide what children should be drinking. Surely parents should be taking that more seriously.
That's right, but I think parents also want to see action, because parents can't always have eyes on their kids. They send their kids off to school, kids on the way to and from school, they can pop into a newsagent or, shop on the high street and get wired on these things. And, a lot of parents watching will remember, I think it's slightly faded now, but there was a huge fad around Prime energy drinks and, these becoming collector's items and being traded in school playgrounds. And when that becomes the case, I think the government has a role and responsibility to step in. And we are being more activist when it comes to kids. On dentistry, so we've committed to deliver 700,000 emergency NHS dentist appointments. 100,000 of those will be targeted at children. There are dentists out there that are willing to do the work, but we have to pay them. So we've committed £100 million to the emergency dentist appointments, which will be paid for by closing tax avoidance and also closing the tax loopholes that are currently left there by the Conservatives in their non-DOMS arrangements. So it's a fully costed, fully funded policy. As with the wider NHS dentistry challenge, the dentists are there, but they're not doing work in the NHS as a contract such low value. So the Monday after the general election, I'm going to get the British Dental Association in to start the process of wider contract reform so that we can rebuild NHS dentistry, because I'm just really conscious of the fact that NHS dentistry is non-existent in huge parts of the country, and those who can afford it are going private, and those who can't are being left in a poor service for poor people, and that's not right.
Whereas it leaves me scratching my head, and I think, I don't know how I've got a tooth in my head today, but, bearing in mind when I was a youngster and what we were allowed to eat and whatever. But you know what? Dentistry was available. NHS dentistry was available.
They used to come to you, didn't they, in Northern Ireland? Did they come round to the houses and things? Was that? No, I've made that up. OK, ignore me.
Made that up. Yeah, forget that. No, so I actually sit and go, isn't it an absolute scandal and a disgrace that a political party has to legislate for this, has to make sure that the children will be proud to smile, be happy to smile, be confident to smile, whereas nowadays it just must be horrendous.
Yeah, and it's not just kids. There are lots of adults out there. I've had some really shocking horror stories come into my inbox of DIY dentistry, people pulling their own teeth out, stories from people who basically struggling to find work because they've got prominent teeth missing, and not socialising because they're too embarrassed. And, I think your fundamental point there, Eamon, how have we got to this point, I think is absolutely the right challenge. And my worry is that NHS dentistry is bad enough today. If the Conservatives get a 5th term, we might end up with this being the future for our whole NHS, because I'm looking at the numbers of people that are now voting with their feet and are paying for private scans, paying for private treatment, in some cases now getting themselves into serious debt because understandably people think, well, I'm putting my health first, so I'll borrow or I'll put this scan on the credit card and worry about paying for it later. That's not a future for healthcare in the country that I want to see. And with NHS dentistry, there are dentists out there. Like, that's unlike some of the other staffing challenges we've got in the NHS where it's going to take time to recruit people. The dentists are there, but the problem is the value of their contract. And that's why I'm treating this as such a priority that I've said if Labour wins the general election, it's still an if by the way, we'll get them in on the Monday after the election to start that process so we can get the dentists back into the NHS.
Sorry to interrupt, we're really short on time. Just quickly, before I let you go, because you are focusing on youngsters this morning particularly, private schools, your shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, admitted that your 20% VAT on private school fees could lead to larger class sizes in the state sector. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has said that his shadow Attorney General has got your policy wrong. Just explain to us exactly where these children are going to go as parents decide they simply cannot afford this huge hike in private fees.
Yeah, Emily made an honest mistake, and I've done that once or twice this campaign. It's going to happen. We're all human. What we've done is look at the tax breaks that are enjoyed by private schools, looked at the challenges in our state schools where we've got, teachers who aren't qualified in maths teaching maths at GCSE in a way they really shouldn't be. And we're going to plug that gap by ending the tax breaks on independent schools. We don't believe that's going to increase class sizes in state schools.
Where are these kids going to go?
Well, let's just bear in mind, independent school fees have gone up above inflation every year for more than a decade. So these schools that are now, pleading poverty and saying this is going to be a disaster, I just don't buy it.
Inflation hasn't gone up by 20% in 1 year. We've seen inflationary rises over the years, but not in such a huge way as Labour is proposing to do to tuition fees. And I just ask one last time, where exactly are all of these children that will no longer be able to be in the private sector be schooled? If they're not going to be in these larger classes, are you going to build new classes, new classrooms, new schools?
Well, as I say, two things. Firstly, independent schools will have to cut their cloth accordingly. And I suspect, because they are businesses, that they will not set their price point at a point that sees parent numbers and pupil numbers fall, because they are businesses and they have a business-like approach to their fee setting, which is why they've put their fees up above inflation for more than a decade. And secondly, look at the demography of our youth cohort now. We're actually seeing a decline in numbers of kids in state schools because of demographic trends. So we won't see class sizes rising. I actually think what independent schools will do is not pass on this cost to parents. They will cut their cloth because their businesses rely on pupil numbers. And that's why I don't believe the special pleading. And finally, we're being honest, there are difficult choices at this election. The public finances are in a mess. And we are unapologetic about prioritising the 93% of kids who attend state schools who do not get a second chance in life, do not get a second chance in those core subjects like maths where we've got shortages. We're putting those kids first, and I think that is the right Labour thing to do.
Wes Streeting, very interesting to hear from you. Thanks for your time this morning.